Hi, Taylor. I am on a brief 4-hour break from work. I need to go right back in a little bit, and I have to have a meeting after this. But I also needed to record this video today. And so I am going to tell you as succinctly as possible about my favorite book and why it's my favorite book and why I do not think any book will ever top this one for me. If you don't know me, my name's Azaria. I read and I write primarily magical realism, although I do some creative nonfiction. Sometimes I do more experimental fiction, but mostly I'm a magical realism writer. My absolute favorite book of all time is Sula by Toni Morrison. Anyone in my life has heard me talk about this book, about my relationship with this book, and about how great I think it is. And now I'm going to impart that upon you. Sula was Toni Morrison's second novel. Her first was The Bluest Eye, published in 1970, and Sula was published in 1973. It has a few of the sort of telltale things for Toni Morrison, complex family relationships, lots of Black feminism or feminist critiques, as well as just really beautiful, captivating literary writing. I first read and last read this novel when I was in the 9th grade. I am now a doctoral student and I haven't read this novel since I was 14, so it's been about 14 years since I read it. I've read chunks of it, I've read excerpts of it. There are definitely favorite parts of the novel that I have, but I haven't read the novel in its entirety again. Not because I don't think I'll like it, not because I'm sort of pushing it off or anything like that, but because this novel is so important to me, and even reading just a few paragraphs of it sends me into like, I don't know, this weird sort of liminal space where I am looking back on all of the relationships I've had throughout my life, where I'm trying to figure out if I'm the Sula in those relationships, if I'm the Nell in those relationships, if I'm neither, right? I even did a bookbinding project with this book where I printed my own copy of Sula and I did a cover design for it and I bound the book myself. It was really, really fun. Until recently, I haven't really been able to pinpoint the exact reasons that Sula is so important to me, but I think now I'm able to sort of put this into words and to tell you exactly why I love this book so much. First, let's give you a brief summary of the text. The novel is about Sula and Nell. They're two best friends living in a town called Medallion, Ohio, and they live in a specific area called the Bottom, which is a Black neighborhood. At the beginning of the novel, there's this tragic incident where the girls are playing with this child named Chicken Little, and Sula specifically is spinning Chicken Little around. She has him out by the arms and she lets him go and he lands in a body of water and he unfortunately drowns. They decide to keep it a secret that this happened to Chicken Little and that they were instrumental in it happening. And over time, this secret that they're holding really starts to strain their relationship. As they get older, they really start to separate. Nell sort of takes on this conventional life, which is what she was encouraged to do by her mother. She gets married, she has children, whereas Sula does things in a completely unconventional way. She lives by herself. She decides to become an educated woman. She decides to go to college, and she takes several different lovers, and that's freedom to her, making all of those decisions. After a period of 10 years, I believe, Sula comes back to Medallion, and everyone's mad. Everyone's mad at Sula because they think that she's promiscuous and that she's unconventional, and they don't like that about her. I think more specifically, they don't like seeing themselves reflected in Sula and in her actions, because in order for Sula to be having relationships with men, there need to be men around for her to have relationships with. And so I think that they really just saw her as this kind of tempting person to be around all of the time, which is their problem, not hers. Sula and Nell reconnect when Sula comes back to town. Nell has her children and her husband at that point, and then tensions sort of peak when Sula actually carries on an affair with Nell's husband, Jude. And when Nell catches them in the act, rather than asking for forgiveness, Jude decides to abandon her and their children, and Sula is absolutely not remorseful whatsoever. Pretty soon after this occurrence, Sula starts to become ill, and Nell visits Sula while she's dying in an attempt to sort of reconcile their relationship, but it really seems to Nell like Sula isn't open to it, and so they don't reconcile anything, and Sula dies, and they are still enemies. Later on, like decades later on, Nell visits Sula's grave, and she finally admits to herself that she really loved Sula. Sula was her absolute best friend, and she wishes that they had been able to reconcile their differences. First and foremost, I love this novel because of all the exceedingly complex female relationships. Sula, in particular, is a really complex and morally ambiguous character, if moralizing is something that you like to do with characters. Essentially, Sula refuses to be boxed in by the people that live in the bottom and even by the readers. Her concept or idea of right and wrong is completely different than that of whoever is reading the novel and whoever is in the novel reacting to her behavior. Also, her relationship with Nell is super complex as well. When Nell visits Sula as she's dying, Nell asks her why. Like, why did you sleep with my husband? He was in love with me. I was in love with him. We were in love with each other. We had a beautiful family. Why would you do that to me? And she specifically asks, why couldn't you let him love me? Now, she asks this because there's sort of this dichotomy between Sula and Nell throughout the novel. Sula is maybe seen as promiscuous, and Sula is a darker skinned girl, which promiscuity is sort of pushed on dark-skinned girls and women often, like a sort of adultification. And Nell is lighter-skinned, though she has a wide nose that her mother makes her put a clothespin on at night when she's a child. So there's this dichotomy between Sula's looks and Nell's politeness or conventional or acceptable behavior. So Nell has finally found someone that thinks that she is attractive, that has fallen in love with her. Nell, who had issues around desirability and attractiveness, has finally found someone, or, this is how she feels, has finally found someone that values her as a romantic partner, only for Sula to come in and snatch it all away. Sula's response to Nell's question about why she just wouldn't let Jude love her was that Sula loved her. And Sula loved her so much that she did this for Nell. I think whether or not you think Sula is telling the truth is up to you. I think it's up for interpretation. And like I said, she's ambiguous on purpose. But I really, truly, and genuinely think that Sula thought she was aiding Nell in some way by sleeping with her husband. I think that Sula thought that Jude would sleep with someone regardless. I think that Sula thought Jude was going to cheat on Nell eventually. And by having him do it with her, she was sort of ripping the Band-Aid off. Definitely doesn't make it right or moral or something that I would do. But when you approach the text that way, I think her actions make more sense. As I said, Nell was lighter skinned and Sula was darker skinned. And so there's also this impact of colorism on their relationship. Now, I think it's important to say that it really did seem like Sula was the one that wasn't open to reconciliation with Nell. And that actually brings me to my next point, which is that the novel really emphasizes these tough and complex family dynamics, which might have colored the relationship between Nell and Sula. Both Nell and Sula found their family dynamics difficult to cope with and then to grow out of. So much so that they kind of ended up emulating their mothers, despite the fact that neither of them wanted to do so. Sula's mother was a woman named Hannah. She was promiscuous and she was married, but her husband died when Sula was only 3 years old. There's an incident that happens in the novel where Hannah ends up on fire. Sula, being a child at this point in time, is so shocked that her mother is on fire in front of her that she stands there and watches and she does nothing. She doesn't get enjoyment out of it, to be clear. She just does not know what to do when someone is immolating in front of her because she's just a child. Her grandmother, a woman named Eva, who ends up raising Sula after this, actually jumps from the balcony in an attempt to save her daughter, Hannah, but unfortunately, she isn't able to do so. This incident makes Eva think that Sula is evil, and Sula has a birthmark above her eye. Some people see it as a rose, but some people, particularly those who think Sula is evil or overly promiscuous in some way, they see it as a snake. After the death of her mother, Sula's uncle, whose name is Plum, is killed by his own mother, Eva. He'd recently returned from the war and was racked with PTSD, which he treated with heroin, which quickly developed into an addiction. Because his mother didn't see any way out of it for him, she figured that the best thing for her to do was to kill him. This makes fire a symbol in the book, and I think it sort of puts into perspective or contextualizes Sula's behavior later in life. When this is what you're surrounded by, how are you supposed to act when out on your own? Nell's mother, on the other hand, was the daughter of a sex worker, and because of that, she wanted to live her life and to have her daughter Nell live her life in a completely conventional way. We already talked about the clothespin, but Nell's mother also just hates Sula and her family. She does not like how unconventional they are. She doesn't like how Sula's mother was sleeping around. She really did not like the family at all and didn't want Nell hanging out with them. As I said previously, neither Sula nor Nell wanted to be like their mothers, and unfortunately, they ended up in very similar positions. Nell ended up being a single mother. She attempted to go the conventional route only to end up single and raising her children. Sula went the unconventional route intentionally, but still ended up moving back to Medallion, living in the very same house that her grandmother, her mother, and her uncle lived in, and dying early, just like her brother did. As I said before, the complex family dynamics are kind of a calling card for Toni Morrison. They're definitely in The Bluest Eye if you read that one, but they're also in Beloved, they're also in Home. Her books have these really, really complex and realistic and almost alive families. Finally, last but absolutely never least, I love the way that Morrison talks about Nell's depression. After her husband leaves and she feels incredibly betrayed by him, she feels incredibly betrayed by Sula, Nell falls into a deep depression. And I think this is really understandable. She's absolutely alone. Her mother is deceased. Her husband is gone. One of her only friends is gone. And so she turns to her children for refuge. She puts all of her time and energy into caring for them, and she even sleeps in the same bed with them. Morrison decides to symbolize Nell's depression with a ball of fur. And the ball of fur is reminiscent of maybe like those eye floaties that you get sometimes, where every time you look at it, it kind of moves out of the way. That's kind of what her depression is sort of characterized as. It's this thing that's always at the periphery of her vision, this ball of fur. And she always wonders what it is, what's it doing there, when did it get there, how did it get there? But she doesn't wonder about it enough to take the time to investigate it. She actively ignores it. And she tells herself that it's because she needs to be there for her children. She needs to be strong for her children. And so she ignores this ball of fur, this depression, for years and years and years. And then decades later, she kind of lets out all of this emotion when she finally visits Sula's grave. Writing about the ball of fur is just, it's so wonderful. And I never would have thought to symbolize depression in that way, but it really, really works for the text. I remember when my very best friend, who became my best friend in high school and was my best friend all throughout my bachelor's degree, I remember when we finally parted ways, and to this day, I've never been so heartbroken. Like, never in my life have I ever hurt so bad. It didn't feel like I lost a friend or a family member even. It felt like I'd lost part of myself. This girl knew me so well, and I knew her so well. And we just loved being with each other. We loved each other's company. And then it just seemed like one day she became cold. And I remember crying my eyes out once I realized that it was over and we would never be cool again. And I remember thinking about this book because I read it in the 9th grade and I liked it in the 9th grade, but I just didn't understand why Sula and Nell couldn't reconcile, and I didn't understand why Nell still held so much space in her heart for Sula all of those years later, considering what Sula had done to her. But I absolutely get it now, and I got it with the fall of that relationship. Years after we fell out, my old best friend contacted me on Instagram, and I didn't see it until months later, but she contacted me because she wanted some information on a grant. I don't know what grant she was talking about. Maybe if I would have seen the message closer to when she'd sent it, then I would know. But when I finally checked it, I didn't know. And it kind of hurt that she couldn't reach out to me for any other reason than to ask me for something. My last message to her was a happy birthday message, and I was saying that the next time that I was in town, that we should hang out. She was very receptive to that message, thanked me. And that was the last time we spoke until she sent that grant message on Instagram because my number had changed. And so I blocked her. I didn't think that there was anything left there for either one of us. And I definitely wish that we both had handled it differently. At that point, we're completely different people, and I had nothing to offer her. I really genuinely think that as time goes on, this book will become even more important in my life. I would really like to revisit this book like every year or every couple of years just to see how it fits into the framework of my life. But I don't know. Maybe I should read it again first. But that's all. What's your favorite book? Let me know. I hope you're having a great day, and I need to get ready for work again. So I'll see you next time.